If you were born in 1960, 2026 changes one number. That number is your full retirement age, and for the first time it climbs to a flat 67. Claim a single month before that, and the penalty is steeper than it was for anyone born ahead of you. Not by a rounding error. Misread the threshold that belongs to your own birth year, and you can permanently shave 5 to 6% off every check you collect for the rest of your life. That reduction never heals. It follows you into your 80s. And here is what almost nobody claiming this year understands. The headlines promising secret Social Security rules for people born in specific years are not describing a bonus. They are describing thresholds, and most people are reading those thresholds in exactly the wrong direction. So if the birth year rules aren't the gifts everyone is sharing online, what did being born in a specific year actually change for you in 2026? Because that headline is half true, half dangerous. And the wrong half is spreading fastest. The people forwarding those birth year headlines are not gullible. That is the first thing worth saying plainly. Many of them read carefully, distrust marketing, and have watched their own paychecks long enough to know that the fine print usually favors someone else. So when a claim spreads that Social Security has quiet rules keyed to the year you were born, dismissing the believers as naive misses what is actually happening. Because the belief has a real skeleton underneath it. Here is the strongest version of the argument, stated fairly. Social Security genuinely does treat birth years differently. That is not a rumor. Congress wrote it into law in 1983 when a bipartisan commission led by Alan Greenspan recommended raising the age at which workers could collect an unreduced benefit. Rather than move the age all at once, lawmakers phased it in, slowly, cohort by cohort, stretched across decades so no single group of workers would feel the full blow at the same moment. The result is that two people, one born in 1954 and one born in 1960, live under measurably different rules, same program, same trust fund. Different math, assigned by birth year. So a person who says birth year changes their Social Security is not wrong. They are describing something the statute actually does. The historical parallel makes this even more understandable. Think of how the country handled the shift from leaded to unleaded gasoline in the 1970s and 80s. There was no single overnight ban. Older cars kept running on the old fuel, while newer models were built for the new standard. And for years, the pump you chose depended on the year stamped on your vehicle. Nobody found that mysterious. The rule tracked the model year because the machine underneath was different. Social Security's retirement age works the same way. The year you were built into the system determines which standard applies to you. That parallel is exactly why the myth survives. People correctly sense that birth year matters, and then a headline supplies the wrong conclusion about how. Now the rebuttal, and it is narrow but decisive. Everything above is true right up to the word bonus. The phase-in is real. The birth year differences are real. But the online version quietly flips the sign. It takes a schedule designed to raise the retirement age, to make workers wait longer for the same full check, and repackages it as a special benefit unlocked by your birth year. A gift, something the well-informed can claim and the rest will miss. That inversion is where careful people get taken. The 1983 amendments did not hand later cohorts anything extra. They moved the goalposts back. A worker born in 1943 reached full retirement age at 66. A worker born in 1960 now reaches it at 67, a full year of additional waiting for the identical unreduced amount. The birth year rules cost the newer cohorts more, not less. The direction of the effect is precisely opposite to what the headlines promise. So the believer is right about the premise and wrong about the payoff. Birth year does define your rules. It just defines them as a threshold you must reach, not a reward that arrives. And this is the quiet danger. When someone expects a bonus and instead encounters a penalty they never saw coming, they tend to act early, to grab what they assume is theirs before it disappears. That single misreading, multiplied across a claiming decision that locks in for life, is how good faith turns into a permanent cut. The kernel of truth inside the rumor is real. Something about your birth year genuinely changed, but it points at a threshold, not a gift. And the shape of that threshold is where the actual money lives. Look at the schedule itself, cohort by cohort, and the whole story stops being mysterious. It becomes a ladder, one rung raised at a time, each rung assigned to a range of birth years. Start at the bottom. Anyone born in 1937 or earlier reached full retirement age at 65, the original number written into the program in the 1930s. Then the 1983 phase-in begins its slow climb. Born between 1943 and 1954, and your full retirement age sits at exactly 66. That is a plateau, a full 11 birth years parked at the same rung, which is part of why so many people assume the number simply is 66. For over a decade of cohorts it was. Then the climb resumes, and it resumes in an oddly precise way. It does not jump straight from 66 to 67. It crawls up in 2-month steps. Born in 1955, and your full retirement age is 66 and 2 months. Born in 1956, 66 and 4 months. 1957, 66 and 6 months. 1958, 66 and 8 months. 1959, 66 and 10 months. Each birth year adds 60 days to the wait for an unreduced check. Follow that staircase up, 1 2-month step at a time, and it lands somewhere specific. Born in 1960 or later, the full retirement age is a flat 67. The ladder stops there. No further step is scheduled under current law. Here is the turning point, and it is the reason 1960 matters in 2026 and not before. A person born in 1960 turns 67 in 2026. This is the first calendar year in which the top rung of that entire staircase, the 67 that has been approaching cohort by cohort since 1983, actually arrives for a living, claiming group of workers. Everyone ahead of them climbed a shorter ladder. The 1959 cohort still got there 2 months early. The 1960 cohort is the first to owe the full year of additional waiting that the 1983 Commission set in motion. That is what makes it a genuine hinge rather than a headline. Nothing new was passed in 2026. No fresh rule was signed. The mechanism was written more than 40 years ago and has been advancing on a fixed timetable ever since. Like a clock that finally strikes the hour it was wound to strike. 2026 is simply the year the 67 rung became someone's present tense instead of someone's future. And this is where the consequence lands, quietly, on a specific decision. The full retirement age is not just a number on a chart. It is the anchor point from which every early claiming reduction is measured. Move the anchor from 66 to 67, and you have lengthened the distance between the earliest a worker can claim, age 62, and the age at which the check arrives whole. A longer distance means more months of reduction stacked between those 2 points. The 1960 cohort faces the maximum spread the current schedule allows. The latter is not a list of trivia. It is the reason the math for a 1960-born worker is harsher than the math for anyone who came before, even someone born just 1 year earlier. Same program, same rules on paper, but a full retirement age 1 full year later, and a reduction window 1 full year wider. Which raises an obvious question about that reduction window, and a less obvious one hiding behind it. Because if the schedule was always public, printed in tables, posted for decades, then where did the far more exciting story come from, the one about secret rules keyed to your birth year? That version did not appear from nothing, and its origin explains why the correct chart lost to the wrong headline. 30%. That is the maximum an early claim can strip from a Social Security check, and the 1960 cohort is the first group of workers exposed to the full weight of it. Hold that number, because most people who see it assume it describes some catastrophic edge case that will never touch them. It doesn't. It describes the arithmetic waiting for anyone born in 1960 who claims it's 62 instead of 67, and the mechanism underneath it is quieter and more ordinary than the figure suggests. Here is what that 30% actually hides. The reduction is not a single penalty. It is a stack of monthly cuts, applied one at a time across every month you claim before full retirement age. For the first 36 of those months, the system subtracts roughly 5/9% per month. For any month beyond 36, it subtracts 5/12%, Claim the earliest allowed at 62, and a worker born in 1960 is claiming a full 60 months early. 36 months at the steeper rate, 24 more at the gentler one. Run it out and the check lands at 70% of the full amount. The missing 30% is the price of those 60 months. Now recalculate what changed for the newest cohort, because this is where the birth year effect stops being abstract. A worker born in 1954 also faced early claiming reductions, but that worker's full retirement age was 66, not 67. Claiming at 62 meant claiming 48 months early, not 60. 48 months of reduction caps out at about 25%. The 1954-born worker who claimed at the earliest moment kept 75 cents on the dollar. The 1960-born worker keeps 70. Same decision, same age 62, 5 percentage points further underwater, purely because the anchor moved a year later. Put real dollars on it, and the abstraction dissolves. Consider two composite workers with an identical full benefit of $2,000 a month at their respective full retirement ages. The 1954-born worker claims at 62 and collects $1,500. The 1960-born worker, entitled to the same full $2,000, claims at 62 and collects $1,400. $100 a month. Every month. For the rest of a life that could run 25 or 30 years. That is a gap of $1,200 a year, $30,000 or more over a long retirement, for no reason other than the year printed on a birth certificate. Notice what this does to the myth. The online story promised that being born later unlocked something extra. The ledger says the opposite in plain numbers. Born later, under this schedule, and the same early decision costs more. The reduction window widened. The penalty deepened. The newest cohort pays the highest toll to claim early, not the lowest. And the cruelty of it is how invisible the difference feels in the moment. The 1960-born worker signing up at 62 sees a check that looks reasonable. $1,400 is not an alarming figure. Nothing on the enrollment screen flashes to say this is $100 thinner than the identical decision would have produced for someone 6 years older. The penalty does not announce itself. It simply arrives, smaller, and stays smaller, month after month. That is the effect nobody forwards. It photographs badly. A headline about a secret bonus travels, a 2-month reduction step, and a 5 percentage point cap do not. So the accurate story, that your birth year set a threshold, and crossing it early costs the newest cohorts more than it ever cost anyone before them, stays buried under the exciting one. But there is a wrinkle worth being honest about before this becomes a story of pure loss. Because if birth year only ever widened the penalty, the myth of a birth year advantage would have no soil to grow in at all. And it does have soil. So the newer cohorts pay more to claim early. But there is one birth year story that genuinely went the other way. Consider a worker born in 1949. Call her a composite of millions. A bookkeeper who spent 30 years watching other people's ledgers and worrying quietly about her own. In 2011, the year she turned 62, she sat at her kitchen table with the same enrollment screen everyone dreads, doing the same arithmetic of fear. And for her, the numbers pointed a direction almost no cohort after her would enjoy. Her full retirement age was 66, flat. She sat on that 11-year plateau, the 1943 through 1954 cohorts, all parked at the same rung that a later worker would look back on with something close to envy. Her early claiming window ran 48 months, not 60. Her deepest possible penalty capped at 25%, not 30. Every threshold that would tighten for the people behind her was, for her, already as loose as the modern schedule ever allowed. But the plateau was not the real gift. Delay was. She didn't claim at 62, she waited. And because her full retirement age was 66, every month she postponed past it earned a delayed retirement credit. 2/3 of 1% a month, 8% a year, all the way to 70. A worker who reaches full retirement earlier reaches the runway for those credits earlier, and gets to bank a longer, cleaner stretch of them before the credits stop accruing at 70. Her earlier anchor didn't just soften the penalty for claiming early, it lengthened the reward for claiming late. Run it against the newer cohort and the asymmetry is quiet, but real. A 1960-born worker who wants the same delayed credits has to first climb to 67 before a single one begins. That is a full extra year of waiting just to reach the starting line the 1949 worker crossed at 66. Same 8% a year on the far side, but a later door into it, and fewer patient months on the generous side of the ledger for anyone who doesn't intend to work deep into their late 60s. So the honest answer to the question everyone keeps circling, does being born a year later ever actually help or only hurt, is that yes, birth year genuinely favored someone. It favored the plateau cohorts, not because Congress handed them a bonus, but because the phase-in hadn't yet reached them. They inherited the old, lower full retirement age and the old, shorter penalty window, and they got to stand on that ground while the staircase kept climbing behind them. That is the soil the myth grew in. Somewhere in the retelling, the plain fact that earlier cohorts had it easier mutated into the fiction that later cohorts have something special. The advantage was real. It just belonged to the people ahead of you, not behind. Being born later under this schedule has never once improved the terms. It has only moved the anchor back and made the same choices cost more, which is precisely why the good faith believer keeps getting turned around. They heard, correctly, that one birth year beat another. They simply assumed the winning year was theirs. And that leaves exactly one piece still standing. The single change in 2026 that everyone assumes is keyed to a birth year, that everyone braces to check their own year against, and that in fact lands on every recipient alive at the same moment, regardless of when they were born. The 2026 cost of living adjustment does not care what year you were born. Not a little, not at the margins, not at all. It is the single Social Security change most people brace to check against their birth certificate. And it is the one change on the entire list that reads the same for a worker born in 1943 and a worker born in 1960. Here is the contrast. The myth cannot survive. Every rule this video has examined so far, the full retirement age, the reduction window, the 2-month staircase, is keyed to birth year by design. The COLA is keyed to something else entirely, prices. Specifically, it tracks a wage and price measure the Social Security Administration recalculates each year, the CPIW, comparing the third quarter of the current year against the third quarter of the last. When that index rises, every benefit and payment rises by the same percentage on the same December into January schedule. The 2025 adjustment landed at 2.5%. The 2026 figure follows the identical formula, applied identically to everyone drawing a check. That word everyone is the part that gets lost. The COLA is not a threshold you cross. It is not a rung you climb to. It is a flat, universal recalculation that lifts an 80-year-old's check and a newly claiming 67-year-old's check by the same fraction on the same day. Now go deeper, because the confusion here is more revealing than it first appears. The Social Security actuaries have documented for years that public understanding of the COLA is unusually poor relative to how simple the rule is. Surveys of near retirees repeatedly find that a large share believe their annual increase depends on when they claimed, or how much they earned, or, increasingly, what year they were born. It does not. A percentage applied to a base is birth year blind by construction. And this is exactly the crack the viral headlines exploit. Take a real, universal event, a COLA that genuinely arrives in 2026, and wrap it in birth year language, and you have manufactured a rule that feels personal and exclusive when it is neither. The believer sees 2026 change next to your birth year in the same headline and fuses them. The COLA becomes the imagined bonus. The birth year becomes the imagined key. Two true facts, welded into one false one. Peel them apart, and the whole architecture of the myth finally stands exposed. Birth year sets your full retirement age. Birth year sets your reduction factor. Birth year sets your delayed credit starting line. Those are thresholds, and they run against the newest cohorts. The COLA sets your annual raise, and it runs to everyone at once, indifferent to the year on your record. The rules that depend on your birth year cost you. The rule that doesn't is the only one people mistake for a gift. So the confusion is precisely inverted. The change people scramble to check their birth year against is the one place birth year is irrelevant. And the changes that genuinely turn on birth year are the ones people wave off as boring old tables. Which finally clears the ground, with the bonus dismantled, the plateau explained, the penalty priced, and the COLA put back where it belongs. Only one question is left standing. The practical one every 55 to 67-year-old actually came here for. Not what the myth says. What a person should actually do with their own birth year in 2026, now that the noise is gone and the mechanism is plain. Strip away the noise, and the correct use of your birth year turns out to be almost embarrassingly simple. It was never a code to unlock. It was 2 facts to look up, and 1 decision to weigh honestly against your own life. Fact 1. Find your full retirement age on the ladder. Fact 2. Measure the distance between that age and the moment you actually need the money. Everything that matters lives in that gap. The birth year does not hand you anything. It only tells you how steep the ground is between age 62 and a whole check. So here is the rule, addressed to you directly. If you were born in 1960 or later, your full retirement age is 67, and your early claiming window is the widest the current schedule allows. That is not a reason to panic, and it is not a reason to grab your benefit at 62 before some imagined door closes. There is no door. The 67 is fixed in law. What the wider window actually means is that every year you wait buys back more than it ever did for the cohorts ahead of you. The penalty is deeper, which means the recovery from not triggering it is larger. Your birth year did not give you a bonus. It gave you a steeper price for impatience and a bigger reward for the opposite. If you were born between 1943 and 1954, you already stood on the plateau. Your full retirement age is 66. You inherited the shorter penalty window and the earlier door to delayed credits. Nothing in 2026 changes that. If you have not yet claimed, the delayed credit math is unusually kind to you, and waiting towards 70 remains one of the few guaranteed 8% returns left in a retiree's life. And if you were born in the 2-month step years, 1955 through 1959, find your exact age on the staircase, 60 days per birth year, and measure from there. Do not round to 66. Do not round to 67. The precise number is the anchor every calculation hangs on. Consider what this looks like at a kitchen table. A composite couple, both born in 1960, both entitled to $2,000 at 67. The instinct, fed by a year of headlines, is to claim at 62 and lock in what feels like theirs. But run the rule instead of the rumor. $1,400 now, permanently, versus $2,000 at 67, or considerably more if either partner waits towards 70. The birth year did not decide that for them. It only set the terms. The decision was always theirs. That is the whole answer to the question this video opened with. If the birth year rules are not the bonuses everyone shares online, what did being born in a specific year actually change for you in 2026? It set your full retirement age, sized your reduction window, and timed your delayed credits. Those are thresholds, not gifts. The one change that reached everyone equally, the cost of living adjustment, is the only one people mistook for a reward. The myth had it exactly backward. The real work is quiet. Look up your number, measure your gap, weigh the penalty against the years you expect to live and the income you actually need. No secret rule is coming to rescue or to rob you. There is only the schedule, written in 1983, arriving on time. This is education, not personalized advice, but the arithmetic does not lie, and it does not care what the headlines promised. Wealth is built to last, and so is a claiming decision made once for the rest of your life, with the mechanism finally in plain sight.